They said Robb Stark died at the Twins, that his body was sown to grey winds and paraded for mockery, that his name died with the northern banners drenched in wine and blood. But some deaths aren't what they seem not when the old gods are, watching, not when the blood of the first men runs thick and stubborn. Robb had always felt something wild stirring inside him when grey wind was near, a connection fierce and primal. His mother warned him once, after Bran's fall, don't lose yourself in beasts, Robb, but he didn't, not then, not fully. The moment the crossbow bolts tore through him, when the sword pierced his chest, and his mother's scream rose above the treacherous music, Robb fell, not just from the wound, not just into death, he fell through the veil that separates man and beast. Grey wind was raging, blood crazed as arrows pierced his hide. But as Robb's breath slowed, his vision tunneled and his soul leaped into the only thing left of him that still fought. The pain was white-hot, the senses all wrong. He was low to the ground, fast, feral. He saw through golden eyes, smelled blood, betrayal, fire, fear, but above all, rage. Robb had never felt this pure, this clear, this hungry. He was no longer a king, not in the way Westeros knew kings. He was something older, something the maesters feared and whispered about, a skinshanger, a warg, and four. Now, a direwolf, soaked in the blood of his own men. But he wasn't done. Not yet. Grey wind he now tore through fray men in the chaos. For a while, it was just instinct. Rip, tear, kill. But something more than instinct guided his jaws. He remembered names, faces. He knew which of them laughed when Catelyn begged, which ones had spit on Talisa's body. He slaughtered until the archers took aim again, and even then he ran. Not out of fear, out of purpose. He fled the Twins under darkness, bleeding but alive, in a body not his own. For weeks Robb ran, south, then east, then north again, avoiding villages, surviving on instinct and rabbit meat. His human mind flickered inside the direwolf's skull like a half-burnt candle. Time passed, oddly scent, sound, hunger, sleep. He was no longer used to words, and when he tried to remember who he was, it felt like dragging a name out of a cold lake. But slowly, something returned. At night, he'd see Catelyn floating in black water, her eyes wide and red, her throat slashed but whispering his name, his sister's, his bastard brother, his home. He'd forgotten the warmth of Winterfell's hearth. He hadn't thought of snow in days. It hit him all at once, the realization he was still alive, and they thought he was dead. No one would be looking for him. No one would believe. But Robb Stark, the last true wolf, still drew breath, even if it came with a snarl. When the snows returned, he turned north. He'd heard whispers along the road, fray travelers, a butcher's boy, a whore in a barn with a warm fire. The north hadn't bent the knee to the Boltons just yet. There were still pockets of loyalty. Men who spat when the Frey name was mentioned. Men who muttered, the young wolf should never have died. They didn't know how right they were. At the edge of the wolf's wood, an old man with eyes like ash caught sight of the wolf. Instead of fleeing, he knelt. I see you, Stark. You're not the first who's walked in fur to escape death. The man smelled like pine and bloodroot, and his words weren't surprised, only heavy with the weight of knowing too much. The man had no name to give, only a hut buried in trees and the knowledge of skinshangers that even maesters dared not record. He taught Robb how to hold on to himself, how to fight the beast when it threatened to consume his memories, how to remember It took months. But one morning, Robb woke in a man's body, not his. The body was sickly and half-broken, but it was human. The old man had no need of it anymore, said he was slipping into the trees for good. "Take it," he told. "Robb, but don't forget the beast. You'll need him soon." And just like that, the wolf had a face again. Robb Stark had returned from death, but he was no longer a boy, no longer a king. He was something else now, something colder, hungrier, and he had a list. The first thing he did was test his voice. It cracked like old wood, dry and unused. His tongue felt foreign in his mouth. The taste of man again bitter, metallic. The borrowed body was fragile, but Robb moved carefully, stretching limbs that weren't his, learning to walk like a man after running for moons as a wolf. He wasn't sure what was worse, dying or living as something less than what he once was. The face staring back at him from the frozen stream was unfamiliar. Gaunt, wrinkled, eyes sunken deep into sockets, hair thin and grey. Robb Stark, the young wolf, was gone. But the soul, his rage, his memories, his blood still burned. He wore the old man's skin like armor, and it gave him what he needed. Most, invisibility. The Freys wouldn't recognize him. The Boltons wouldn't care. As far as the realm was concerned, he was butchered, mocked, and buried beneath the ruin of a false alliance. But Robb wasn't interested in the realm anymore. He wanted the North. He wanted justice. And above all else, he wanted vengeance. He started small. A village near the neck, where a Frey patrol rested too long, drunk on stolen ale and bored of peace. He watched them from the shadows for 3 days. He knew their leader, Seer Wendell, Freya man, who had laughed when his bannermen paraded Robb's corpse. Robb waited until nightfall, then slipped into the trees. Grey wind returned with a howl. The wolf was never far. He lived inside Robb now, always. The shift wasn't as painful anymore. It was like stepping into fire with purpose. When the wolf came, there was no hesitation. He slaughtered them under a new moon. Wendell lost his. Face first, cheek torn from jaw, tongue hanging uselessly. The others never had a chance. No one lived to tell what killed them, only that their bodies were found flayed and hafted, a symbol carved into the earth beside them. Not the Bolton flayed man, a direwolf's paw print, deep and deliberate. He moved northward after that, into the hills, seeking the broken fragments of the Stark bannermen. He found survivors, scattered, hiding, ashamed. A few Karstarks, a clutch of Umbers who'd refused to bend the knee. One-eyed trappers, thieves, and men with no home but still. Loyal hearts. They didn't know him, of course, but the stories they started to spread like wildfire in dry grass. A wolf in the woods, killing Freys. A ghost who whispered the names of dead Starks before he struck. A curse laid upon the North for betrayal. Some called him a spirit, others a demon. But the old ones, the quiet ones, who still carved prayers into weirwood trees, they called him what he was. The Wolf King walks again. Robb didn't deny it. He let the myth grow, hide behind it. He wore hoods, used false names. But sometimes, at night, when he stared into a fire, he whispered the truth to himself. I died, but I'm not done. He dreamt of Catelyn, often her torn throat, her last scream. Of Talisa, belly full of life, stabbed until it was silent. Of Grey Wind's final howl as crossbows sang. He saw it again, and every time he woke, His heart was pounding, and the taste of blood was thick in his mouth. He marked 10 names: Walder Frey, Roose Bolton, Black Walder, Lothar Frey, Ramsay Snow, Ryman Frey, Seer Hostein, Seer Jared, Little Walder, and one more Tywin Lannister. He might never reach them all, but he would try, and the first, the only place to start was Moat Cailin. It was held by Bolton men, now cutthroats and deserters in their service, filthy, proud, and weak from comfort. Robb approached it with his handful of followers, dozen loyal to the memory of Stark, not even knowing their dead king walked among them. He didn't need many, he only needed the dark. That night, the moon disappeared behind thick storm clouds, and the trees whispered with the voices of old gods. Robb stood before his followers and said nothing. He only closed his eyes and let the wolf rise again. The gates of Moat Cailin ran red before sunrise. No prisoners, no mercy, only bones and a carved sigil of House Stark made from the entrails of those who thought the North had forgotten its king. By morning, ravens flew, the rumors spread again, and this time they had a name. Robb Stark has returned from the grave. They tried to dismiss it at first. Bolton ravens called the stories northern superstition, whispered nonsense among commoners and wildlings. Roose Bolton himself was said to have sneered when his maester read the first report. Ghosts don't carve men open, he said coldly, and wolves don't carry grudges. But the dead at Moat Cailin said otherwise. The flayed bodies of Bolton men were nailed to the walls upside down, their throats ripped out, entrails missing. One body was left kneeling, hands folded, eyes gone. A Bolton banner was shoved into its mouth, soaked in blood. And just below, it painted in crimson, the North remembers. It was enough to rattle even Roose. He ordered Ramsay to ride out, to find the killers, to make an example. But Ramsay didn't ride immediately. He was busy with his own games at the Dreadfoot dogs to train, women to break. He thought the tales amusing. Another bastard chasing ghosts. He didn't know he was next. Robb had sent scouts north and east, spreading whispers and messages hidden in the old tongue, rallying those still loyal. He didn't reveal himself. Not fully, only spoke to the most trusted, and even then he stayed cloaked in shadow and silence. But in the woods beyond Barroton, he made his first real move. There, he came face to face with an old friend, one he never thought he'd see again, Theon Greyjoy. He was barely a man, any more thin, shaking, a patchy beard framing hollow cheeks. He limped, his hands always trembling, his eyes darting like a hunted animal. But when Robb, in the shape of a wolf, stepped into his campfire light, Theon dropped. To his knees, he knew Robb. His voice cracked. Gods, no, you're dead. Robb didn't change back, not yet. He stood there, grey and hulking, fur matted with dried blood, eyes glowing faintly in the flame's reflection. He circled Theon slowly, snarling low. Theon wept. I'm sorry, I'm so. Gods, I didn't know. Their Ramsay he took everything from me. I didn't know how to fight him. I was a fool. Robb stopped in front of him. His growl faded. And then, slowly, the wolf faded. Bones twisted. Fur melted. Flesh reshaped. A man stood before Theon. Not the man he remembered. Not young and bold and beautiful in armor. This man was older, gaunt, scarred eyes, too sharp, too full of grief and fire. But it was him, Robb Stark. Theon couldn't speak. He only bowed his head to the dirt. I should kill you, Robb said softly. I deserve it, Theon whispered, more than anyone. There was a long silence. Wind howled through the trees. But I won't, Robb said at last, because we both lost more than we ever gained. And I need you, Theon, not as a brother, not even as a friend, but as someone who knows what it means to suffer. Theon looked up, eyes wide. You want revenge. I want the North cleansed. I want the Boltons gone. The Freys broken, the Lannisters punished. I want blood to answer blood. Theon nodded slowly. Then you'll have it. I'll show you their weaknesses. I'll show you how Ramsay fights. I'll show you what he fears. Robb's lips twitched almost a smile. Good, because he should be afraid. Together they moved east, gathering what strength they could. Small folk whispered of the return of the young wolf, of the traitor Greyjoy crawling back to the fold. Robb didn't care. Let them speak. Let the rumors grow. He needed chaos. He needed fear. In the dead of night, they crossed the fields outside. The Dread fort, the outer villages, poorly defended, fell quickly. Robb didn't lead an army. He led a hunt, silent, precise. When Ramsay's men awoke, they found their comrades hanging from trees, flayed with Bolton knives, as if their own. Sigil turned on them. And then the screams began. Robb didn't spare the dogs. The kennels burned. The beast pens were emptied, some wolves freed, some slaughtered for sport. Robb didn't care. It was a message. Your cruelty is not yours alone. I learned it. Now I wield it. Ramsay, for the first time in his life, was afraid. He locked the gates of the Dread fort and summoned every man he had. But every night another man vanished. Another sigil carved. Another howl in the dark. Robb wasn't there to reclaim honor. He wasn't there to restore peace. He was there to haunt. And before he left the Dreadfort behind, he whispered a single promise into the night. Ramsay, Snow, you're next. Snow blanketed the Dreadfort like a burial shroud. The flames from the kennels still smouldered, casting eerie glows across. The courtyard, Ramsay hadn't slept in 3 nights. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw them wolves, shadows, ghosts in stark armor. He doubled the watch, flogged the guards who failed, and fed his fear to his dogs. But even they were quieter. Now, they sniffed the air, tails low, as if the wind carried a predator they couldn't face. And still the bodies came, one every night, hung from the battlements, some flayed, some gutted like pigs, all with the same message carved into their skin, or branded into their flesh. The king in the north still lives. In the war room, Ruza's raven carried a message laced with fury. End this now, or I will. Ramsay read it and laughed, though it sounded forced in his throat. Let the old man come. I'll send his bones back in a box. But behind the laugh, he knew something unnatural hunted him. Meanwhile, Robb didn't rest. In the wilds beyond the Dread fort, he had become more than legend. He had become myth. Small folk left food at the bases of heart trees. Bandits fled at the sound of a single howl. And loyalists came from the cracks in the stone tattered, starving. Angry men who remembered what it meant to fight for a Stark. Among them came Mage Mormont, worn but fierce, her daughters close behind. Wireless Manderley sent gold, weapons, and 200 spears. Even the Silent Sisters whispered of a great wolf stalking the woods. And some believed the old gods themselves had returned to punish the traitors of the Red Wedding. Robb used it all. He kept moving Hitandran strikes, burning outposts, ambushing supply lines, slaughtering ravens before they could carry warnings. And always he left a sign, the paw print, the stark sigil, the phrase that now made grown men flinch. The North remembers, but the old man's body he wore began to fail him. The borrowed flesh shook when it shouldn't, his joints ached, his breathing wheezed. He needed something stronger, younger, more lasting. Theon saw it too. You're dying in that skin. Robb didn't respond. He simply watched the fire, fingers twitching as if they still remembered how to hold a sword. Then I'll find another. Theon recoiled. You mean to take, I mean to finish what I started? His voice was rough, not cruel, but cold, purposeful. You can't just keep. Theon bit the rest off. You were once a king, not this. I was once a boy, Robb said quietly. Now I am what the North needs me to be. And that's when the girl came, Arya. At first, Robb didn't believe it. She was older, thinner, eyes like stone, but it was her. She came with the Hound, of all people. Sandor Clegane, scarred and half-broken, but deadly as ever. They'd heard the stories too. Arya had followed the trail of blood and wolves from the twins, hoping, praying. When she saw him shift from wolf to man, her legs buckled. She fell to her knees, covered her mouth, and wept like a child. I saw you die, she whispered. I saw them. They did, Robb said. But I didn't stay dead. Arya embraced him like she would never let go. The Hound, behind her, muttered something about bloody Starks and their ghost tricks, but he stayed. Even he couldn't turn his back on a story like this. With Arya came something Robb didn't expect. Memory, for the first time in moons. He laughed. They spoke of Winterfell, of Bran's games, of Jon's solemn brooding and Rickon's madness. He remembered being alive, not just driven. And when Arya asked what came next, Robb gave her the truth. Ramsay, then Roose. Then I head south. Arya blinked. Why? For the lion, she knew who he meant. Tywin Lannister, the architect of it all. The man who bought the phrase, who allowed the Boltons to betray the North. The one who destroyed House Stark, not with swords, but with coin and quiet words. I want his head, Robb said. Arya's eyes darkened. Then let me come. Robb stared at her, at the cold steel in her eyes. She was no child. She was a blade now, forged in loss. He nodded slowly. We'll kill them all, together. But before that Ramsay had to die, and so the plan was set. Theon would open the inner gates. Arya and the Hound would strike from the kennels. Robb would come as the wolf. The night before the siege, the snow fell heavier than ever. It was the same kind of storm that had blanketed Robb the night he died. But this time, it would be Ramsay's turn to bleed. The wind screamed like a dying beast the night they came for Ramsay Bolton. Snow fell so thick it swallowed torches whole, cloaked the ground in silence. The Dreadfort's walls loomed tall, proud, and cold, but inside, fear was festering. Guards jumped at shadows. Servants whispered prayers to gods long silent. Even Ramsay's hounds winked at nothing ears, pinned back, tails low. Robb waited in the woods, crouched in the snow, his breath rising in clouds. His paws were soaked in red from the kill of a scout who'd gotten too close. He didn't shift back. Not yet. The wolf was faster, stronger, purer. Theon had already slipped inside his old knowledge of the Dreadfort's tunnels, making him more useful than ever. Theon Greyjoy had once betrayed the Starks. Now he risked his life to redeem a ghost. Arya and the Hound waited on the far side, near the eastern kennels. Her sword needle was strapped to her back. But tonight she also carried a dagger made of Valyrian steel, a gift from the Faceless Ones. For special names, she had said. Tonight she would use it. The signal came at midnight. Single burst of flame from the top of a chimney. Theon had reached the inner gates. Robb ran. He was silent and terrible, a blur of grey fur and blood-stained snow. He leaped over the outer wall with inhuman strength, claws gripping stone, eyes glowing like embers. The Boltons never saw him coming. The first died before he could scream, throat torn out, his body crumpling like parchment. The second managed to shout before Robb took his face off. By the time alarms rang, Robb had already opened the main gate. The north poured in behind him. Mage Mormont led the charge. Umbers and mountain clans screamed old war chants, their axes flashing in the firelight. The courtyard erupted into chaos. Inside, Ramsay watched from the tower window, lips curled. In disgust, "Filthy peasants," he muttered. "All for a dead dog." He turned to his servant. "Fetch the girls, and the bastard's sword." But he never got the chance. Arya came from the shadows, like vengeance made flesh. Needle pierced the servant's throat before he could move. She didn't speak. She didn't hesitate. When she found Ramsay, she didn't announce herself. She lunged. Ramsay blocked the first blow with a dagger of his own sloppy, wild. Arya danced back, eyes locked, breath slow. "You don't remember me," she said, "but I remember everything." He laughed. "You're one of his wolves, then, come to bite the master." "No," she said coldly. "I came to skin you." Down below, Robb tore through the inner halls like a storm. His claws left streaks across stone, his growls echoing through blood-soaked corridors. The fighting was brutal. He saw men loyal to his house fall. He saw traitors beg. He offered no mercy. The wolf didn't know forgiveness. He burst into the tower at last, just in time to see Arya drive her dagger deep into Ramsay's thigh. The bastard shrieked, kicked her aside, and stumbled toward his sword. But he never reached it. Robb shifted mid-lep, flesh cracked, fur dissolved, bones realigned. By the time he landed, he was a man again. Not the old man's body. Not anymore. That skin had burned away in the fire of vengeance. This time, he wore his own face, reclaimed from death, rebuilt in rage. The Red Wedding had tried to erase him. The gods had other plans. Ramsay's eyes widened in disbelief. "No, you're dead. I killed you." Robb picked up the bastard's own sword. "No," he whispered. "You only started the dying." He drove the blade through Ramsay's belly, slow, deliberate, and then twisted. Ramsay gasped once, then slumped forward, blood spilling from his mouth. Robb held him upright as he died. The North remembers. The sound of the dying faded into silence. The Dreadfort was taken. The fires were out. And for the first time since the twins, the Stark banners were raised in victory. Arya stood beside him, soaked in blood, eyes distant. "That was for Mother," she said, "and Talisa, and the babe." Robb nodded, but he wasn't smiling. There was still Roose, and far to the south, Tywin Lannister still breathed. Robb Stark had risen from the grave, but the war was far from over. The Black Raven flew south, with wings like shadow and dread trailing behind it. It carried no sigil, no seal, just a piece of parchment, torn and smeared with blood. 5 words, He is coming for you. The raven landed in King's Landing. Tywin Lannister read the message over breakfast, the scent of lemon cakes and ink thick in the air. He didn't flinch, didn't even blink, only folded the note, slow and calm, and passed it to Mester Pycelle. "More Stark nonsense," he said, sipping wine. "The North gnaws on old bones. Let them." But something in his fingers trembled, ever so slightly, as he set the cup down. Far in the north, Robb stood in the Dreadfort's great hall, staring into the flames. The banners were torn down, the Bolton-flayed man thrown into the mud. A Stark wolf hung in its place, no bloody, burned at the edges, but flying. Roose Bolton hadn't come. Coward, but he would return, or be dragged back. Theon limped into the hall, face bruised, hands still healing. "Roose is at the Twins," he said. "He's hiding behind Walder Frey's fat skirts." Robb didn't speak at first. Then I'll drag him out myself." "You mean to march?" Theon asked, eyes narrowing. "With what army?" Robb looked around. "With what we have. With what they fear." And they did fear him now. The North buzzed like a hive disturbed. The bannermen who had bent the knee to the Boltons were panicking. Some fled, others tried to renounce Roose and beg forgiveness, and still more those with old loyalties and older oaths began to answer the whispers. "He's alive, he walks. With wolves, he doesn't die." Robb let the stories run wild. Let them carry him, but he needed more than fear. He needed Winterfell. The castle was whole again, more or less. The Boltons had rebuilt it, claiming it in Robb's name while stripping it of everything sacred. The heart tree had been left to rot. The crypts had been sealed. The godswood burned and replaced with training grounds for Ramsay's dogs. He would reclaim it. He had to. And so, under a moonless sky, Robb rode south. Not as a king. Not yet. He wore furs blackened with ash, and a cloak sewn from a wolf's hide. Arya beside him, needle at her hip, and vengeance burning in her steps. Theon followed, the hound not far behind, his face like a grave marker of old sins. The path to Winterfell was paved in silence. Villages shuttered, roads empty, but the old ways were watching. In the woods, crows watched from branches like sentinels. At night, Robb dreamed again of Bran falling, of Catelyn screaming, of cold snow-stained red. When they reached Winterfell's gates, they found them already open. A surprise, but not. A gift. Men stepped forward, bearing no banners, only torches and grim expressions. The first was tall, armoured in old steel, his face pale and marked by a single burn across his cheek. "Lord Stark," the man said slowly, "or whatever you are now." Robb dismounted. "I am what they made me." The man dropped to one knee. "So are we." Dozens followed. Old soldiers, farm boys, former Stark bannermen with nothing left but swords and guilt. They had killed under the Boltons, yes, but they remembered who they served, and they had waited for a sign. Now the sign stood before them in flesh and fury. Winterfell did not burn, it opened, and when Robb stepped through its gates, he felt something stir beneath the stones. He walked the halls as if they still echoed with laughter. He found the godswood, what little was left of it, and knelt beneath the charred remains of the weirwood. "I am home," he whispered, "but I am not whole." And then, as if hearing him, the wind howled. The earth beneath the godswood shifted, groaned, and he saw Bran, not in flesh, not truly, but in a vision fleeting and strange, a boy and a tree, eyes white as snow, voice carried by crows. "Robb," the voice whispered, "the North needs more than vengeance." Robb tried to speak, but the vision was gone. Arya saw him stagger. "You all right?" He didn't answer right away. Then, Bran's, alive. Her eyes narrowed. "Where?" "Far," Robb said, "and out of reach. For now." They lit no feasts, sang no songs. This was not a victory. This was preparation. Robb stood in the great hall of Winterfell, beside Arya, Theon, and the few who remained. And he made a promise, not just to those who knelt, but to the stones, the snow, the ghosts in the crypts. "I will not be your king," he said. "I will be your justice." Roose, Bolton, Walder Frey, Tywin Lannister, their time was running out. The night before they rode to the Twins, Robb stood in the crypts of Winterfell alone. The old kings were quiet. No wind, no snow, only cold stone and long dead names. He stared at the statue of Eddard Stark, his father, still-faced, sword across. His lap, carved eyes, watching with solemn judgment. Robb's hand trembled slightly as he touched the stone. "I tried to do it right," he whispered. "The oaths, the honor. I tried to be you." The silence didn't answer. "I died for it." His voice cracked, but only once. Then it hardened. "They killed Mother, my wife, my child, and they still sleep warm in their halls, thinking the North forgot." His breath fogged in the cold. "Ere I remember." He stood there a long while. When he returned above ground, dawn was rising through ash-colored clouds, and the war horns were already sounding. The march to the Twins was slower than the others, not because of distance, but because this time Robb wanted them to see him coming. No more shadows, no more quiet murders in the dark. He rode under the direwolf banner again, grey against black, and it flapped in the wind like an omen. Every village he passed, the people came out to watch. Some bowed, some cried. Many dropped to their knees in stunned silence. The whispers returned stronger now. "Robb Stark is alive. He walks again. He's coming for Walder Frey and the Twins." They heard. Walder Frey did not sleep in his tower. He sat at his long table, surrounded by sons and grandsons, clutching his goblet like a weapon, his eyes darting at every sound. "They say he's a ghost," Black Walder said, pacing behind him. "A wolf that wears a man's skin." "It's nonsense, is it?" muttered another. "What about Ramsay and the Dreadfoot Mote?" Calen Walder slammed his cup down. "Ravens lie, men die. If he wants our gates, let him take them." He still thought himself untouchable. But gates meant nothing to the dead. 3 nights later, Robb Stark stood on the riverbank across from the Twins. Snow fell heavy again, quieting the world. His army, smaller than the last he'd led, stood behind him in black and grey. Umbers, Mormonts, mountain clans. Arya beside him, calm and still. Theon, gaunt but resolute. The Hound, sharpening his blade and muttering about ugly castles and worse men. The Freys had lit their torches. Their men lined the walls. Crossbows gleamed under torchlight. But Robb didn't bring siege towers. He brought wolves, dozens of them, some trained, some wild, all hungry. They had come to him in the woods, as if called by blood. He gave them a name that night of the pack, and when he gave the signal, they surged forward like a living tide. The Freys opened fire, bolts rained down, men shouted, but wolves leapt the trenches, scaled stone, tore through the weak points in the gate. Within moments, the courtyard was chaos, fur and fangs and screams. Robb led the charge himself, sword in hand, eyes burning like coals. He didn't wear armor this time, only the fur cloak and the look of someone who had nothing left to lose. They breached the gate. They poured in, and the twins burned. Arya moved like death itself, cutting down Frey's sons with surgical precision. She danced between blades, silent and graceful, the list whispering in her head. Theon found Ryman Frey trying to escape through the river tunnel. He didn't let him. The hound stormed the feast hall, laughing and cursing as he tore through Walder's guards and Robb. Robb found Walder Frey hiding in the upper chamber, surrounded by trembling sons, all armed but none brave. "You should be dead," Walder gasped. "I was B," drove his blade through one, then another. They fell screaming. Walder backed away, blood soaking his slippers. "I gave you bread. I gave you wine." The old man shrieked. "You gave me death," Robb said, eyes unblinking. Walder tried to crawl away. "Please, please. I'm just an old man. So was my father." Robb didn't kill him quick. He made him watch as Arya entered behind him, calm and quiet, a dagger in her hand. She didn't say a word. She only smiled. Together, they took everything from Walder Frey, every name, every lie, every drop of comfort he had clung to. When he finally died, it was not with dignity. It was with a whimper. By morning, the twins were smoke and ash. No Frey banner flew, only the direwolf. Robb stood on the battlements as the sun rose, hands soaked in blood, heart cold and hard. 2 names remained, Roose Bolton, Tywin Lannister, and now not even the Riverlands would shield them, because the dead do not rest. King's Landing had never known a silence so thick. The usual clamour of bells, the moaning of beggars, the curses of merchants, it was all gone, swallowed by an ease. Word had come from the Riverlands. The twins had fallen. Walder Frey was dead. Dozens of his sons dead, burned, torn apart. The North had risen, and with it, something else. Some said Robb Stark had returned from death itself. Others said he'd never truly died. But the truth didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that he was coming. Tywin Lannister sat in the Red Keep Solar, surrounded by gold, maps, and maesters, but for the first time in decades, even he felt it, the cold hand of reckoning. He had sent Roose Bolton to Winterfell to restore control. Roose never answered. He had paid the Freys to end the Starks. The Freys were now ash, and the ghost of a boy he once underestimated was carving a path through the realm with fury as his crown. Robb rode south, not with an army, but with followers. The pack had grown. Not just wolves and swords, but whispers, fear, the kind of fear that moved faster than any cavalry. People opened their doors to him without asking. Lords in the Vale sent quiet letters. Soldiers deserted their Lannister posts to vanish into the woods rather than face him. He didn't raise a claim to the throne. He raised a claim to the dead. With Arya, Theon, the Hound, and 1,000 loyal ghosts behind him, Robb crossed into the Crownlands like winter itself. No banners, no fanfare, only vengeance. The road to the capital was lined with headstraighters, deserters, Frey cousins, and Bolton remnants. Robb left them there like signposts. The Lion's Day was ending. When they reached the city walls, the gates were barred tight. Gold cloaks lined the ramparts, trembling in formation. Crossbows, scorpions, boiling oil, the full might of Lannister. Defense waited. But Robb didn't storm the gates. He waited. Because he didn't need to strike first. He had something better. It was Jaime who opened the gates. He came alone, swordless, white cloak torn and stained. He rode through the northern lines, flanked by wolves, and dismounted before Robb himself. "You're not a king anymore," Jaime said, "and you're not a ghost." Robb looked at him with those cold grey eyes. "I'm justice." Jaime didn't flinch. "I've done many things. I won't deny them, but my father will answer for them." "You won't get him in battle," Jaime said. "He'll poison you, bribe you, outmaneuver you. That's what he does." Robb studied him. "And what do you want, Kingslayer?" Jaime looked toward the Red Keep, for the lions to stop roaring, for the blood to end. There was a long silence between them. Then Robb turned to his pack, opened the gates. They entered King's Landing without a single blade drawn, and the people poor, broken, fearful cheered, not for a king, but for a reckoning. Tywin Lannister sat alone in the throne room. When they came for him, he had not run. He did not kneel. He waited, spine straight, gaze cold. Robb stepped into the hall like a storm of winter wind. Arya at his side, the hound behind, Theon limping but proud. "Robb Stark," Tywin said, as if greeting a guest. "You've made a mess of tradition. You made a mess of my family, and the world is better for it," Tywin replied. The North was wild, foolish, led by boys who thought honor was strategy. "I was a boy," Robb said, "and you had me butchered like a pig." Tywin stood. "I did what was necessary. So will I." Arya stepped forward. I could slit his throat now. But Robb raised a hand. "No, he dies not by a child's blade, but by his own weight." And with that, he walked forward, unsheathed a dagger, and laid it on the Lion of Lannister's desk. "Take it," he said. "If you believe in anything left inside you, take it and face me like a man." Tywin looked down at the blade, and he saw it, the sigil of House Stark carved into the handle. He did not reach for it. He sat back down. "I die with dignity," he said coldly. "No," Robb replied. "You die with memory." And he turned, gave a nod, and left the room. The doors shut. And when they reopened an hour later, Tywin Lannister sat slumped in his chair, throat slit open, blood staining gold. The wolf had hunted the lion and won. That night, the people lit candles instead of fires, not in mourning, but in awe. A man who had died rose again, not to rule, but to end. Robb Stark did not claim a throne. He did not rebuild a kingdom. He vanished into the woods the next morning, Arya by his side. Some say he went north, beyond the wall, to find the last of his blood. Some say he still walks the woods, a direwolf wearing a man's face. But all of Westeros remembers the king who died, the wolf who returned, the justice that couldn't be killed. The North remembers.